I am so excited about this panel to talk about how governments and commercial entities are working together to keep space usable for all. So we're talking about space sustainability, debris, norms of behavior, and we're so lucky to be joined by speakers from around the world to talk about the role that these more emerging nations can play in this conversation. So to start off with, governments and international bodies have historically set these rules of behavior in space, but so much of the industry today relies on commercial partners who have already, we've seen them taking steps to protect this domain where they make their money, right? It's in their interest for companies to behave responsibly. What are the most effective models you've seen for governments and industry to work together and co-develop these standards, especially for SSA and debris mitigation? Anil, we can start with you and we'll go down the line.
First of all, thank you very much. It's my great honor to be here among the August gathering. First of all, I think start with that everything you do, there are certain rules, regulations, whether you are at home or you're at school or you are at work. So those rules and regulation keeps things at things. So I think we are getting into the new world order in terms of the space, and eventually the rules have to follow. There is no set rule has been set up. So I think it's very important that we set those rules, regulations, which will be healthy in terms of the whatever respect you can do, whether it's a commercial, whether it is a political or things. So I think with that note, I think this is a very important session. We're going to be enjoying very much. Thank you very much.
Andrew, over to you, kind of what you're seeing from New Zealand in terms of the partnership between industry and government in setting these norms.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. From New Zealand's point of view, what we look to do is anchor our approach in some of the high-level frameworks like the UN debris mitigation guidelines, the Artemis Accords, of which New Zealand's a proud signatory, and also industry guidelines such as those issued by CONFRS. And we use that really as a bedrock, as a baseline, which we then can build on through our regulatory system. So our regulatory system will often be confronted with situations which are a lot more specific, and need some more tailored approach. So we start from those foundation guidelines that I mentioned as a starting point, but then we can build our operational policies on top of that, which often manifests in the regulatory system as a condition or a set of conditions that might be attached to a license or a permit that we issue for our industry. And when we're developing those operational policies, we take care to involve our industry. In New Zealand, we're fortunate that there's a vibrant industry, but still a small enough industry that we have very good connections and relations with those. So it's often a co-development process, bringing in the industry and how we're forming those operational policies. And in the New Zealand case, we try to focus very much on outcomes rather than being too prescriptive about what are the requirements that industry players need to meet.
And Dr. Wu, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for Jacqueline for moderating this panel. I'm very pleased to join this distinguished panel to discuss the importance of the orbital stewardship and global space standards. As you know, the space activity, increase expand so rapidly. We are seeing an increasingly crowded and dynamic orbital environment. And in this context, effective orbital stewardship depends not only on government, but also on private sector and also international cooperation. From a TASA, Taiwan Space Agency perspective, much of our operations coordination focus on through the space situation awareness. So compared with the large spacefaring countries, TASA operate only a relative small fleet and launch only a few limited number of satellites each year. However, precisely because of this, these are very precious national investment, so we require responsible operations and reliable SSA. So we rely quite a lot on international cooperation so far. Yeah.
I want to talk next. Andrew, you referenced the Outer Space Treaty and the Artemis Accords. Obviously great steps towards setting some of these norms. But in terms of kind of making sure that people are actually following these rules. There's really nothing in there that's enforceable or binding, especially in the Artemis Accords. So how, and I'd like all three of you to weigh in here as well, but Andrew, we'll start with you. How do you ensure that, these rules that are set are actually like being followed and becoming the norm versus only being followed by the people who do opt in, given that, space kind of requires the opt-in from everyone. There aren't borders in space.
Yeah, so from New Zealand's perspective, we look to embed these requirements into our licensing processes. So our Outer Space and High Altitude Activities Act has a set of requirements that relate to safety, security, our international obligations. So the UN obligations I referenced earlier are actually built into our law. And each time we are looking for a satellite to launch from New Zealand, they have to essentially pass a series of tests to ensure that they're going to comply with that law. And on the orbital debris side, that's all about having a compliant orbital debris mitigation plan covering debris release, breakup prevention, collision avoidance, and re-entry requirements or end-of-life disposal. And we take the monitoring of that pretty seriously. We've got a function in our regulatory team looking at that carefully. Of course, that only covers the satellites that are launched from New Zealand. So how do we sort of push standards more comprehensively internationally? That's where I think we've got an advocacy role to play. There aren't that many states launching currently, so if we have the launching states taking these responsibilities seriously and then using the opportunity in international fora such as UN COPUOS to advocate that approach to other countries which are maybe in the early processes of standing up their own launch activities and regulatory systems. So New Zealand's taken that opportunity and uses the UN and other forums to advertise the way we've approached it on the regulatory side, because for us it's very much learning by doing. We have to do it because of the activities coming through our system.
And Dr. Wu, can you provide, the picture from Taiwan about how you are working to make sure that Taiwanese space companies are kind of following these best practices?
Yeah, but because Andrew just mentioned that we have some concern because we are not a member of the United Nations of COPUOS and or other international coordination framework. So the approach we adopt is we actively engage through partnership and technical cooperation and operation alignment. So we monitor frequently international best practice and align operation with global standards. Also, I think the data sharing, transparency is very, very important to mitigate this risk. That's how we did it. Yeah.
And Anil, India is obviously a launching state, so I wonder if you can, talk about your approach, if it's similar to Andrew's in New Zealand, or how you handle, ensuring compliance with the rules and regulations for Indian countries.
I think this is the job of our space agency but I think as a responsible industry association, we fully aligned whatever the international treaties are, international lines are, and I think India is also stand for that. We are also a part of the Artemis Accord, and so being a fairing space nation, I think our responsibility is to work that the space is become not that contested or congested. I think it is livable because the future lies in that. So as an industry, we are fully aware about the consequences of the policy and the regulatory framework. And it is also, but you cannot do things in isolation. You have to work in international cooperation, and you have to see. And of course, we have opened our private sector recently, last 4 years for the space. So we are still following the big step by our space agency, the thing. And I think, but at the same time, quickly we are learning while we're coming around across and meeting and those all other policymakers and discussing about. I think that at the same time we also giving the feedback to our policymaker that what is to be done, what is not to be done in a different platform. Thank you.
So Andrew, you've already touched on this a little bit. New Zealand is, perhaps smaller than some other nations in space, but is quickly becoming a global power player in space. You mentioned launch. Obviously, you have Rocket Lab, which is a global launch power. How can emerging space stations, help actually shape global norms versus just adopting rules that are set by some of the nations who have more robust space programs at this time?
Yeah, it's interesting because New Zealand is a small player internationally in most fields, but with less than 15 states sort of actively involved in launch activities, we do have an influence on the norms and the way people behave with respect to those activities. And it's actually an even smaller number of states that are really active regulating commercial third parties. So a number of states will be launching their own sovereign systems, and while I'm sure they do have their own rules and guidelines to follow, we've seen many times that sovereign launchers will make ample use of waivers and make the mission work, basically, if it's in the national interest to do so. That's not so much an option for a system like ours, where all the activity is done by a commercial third party, and we need to make sure that the approach we use this time with Rocket Lab is the same approach we're going to use if another operator comes to New Zealand and seeks to launch from New Zealand. So what that opens up actually is an opportunity to create some influence, because there aren't too many people out there who are establishing regulations on some activities. So to use an example that we've had recently, Rocket Lab launched a mission that involved active debris removal, and that's a really novel area for the world. There aren't a set of regulations we can just cut and paste off the internet, so we had to do some industry engagement, work with some industry guidelines, talk to some of our close partners, and come up with our own operational policies for that. But now that we've got those in place, there's an opportunity to champion those for who does this activity next. And the rise of commercial space activities means that increasingly we're going to see those commercial operations spread into other countries as well. So there will be sovereign activity for sure. I'm sure that can continue, but more and more commercial activity will mean, the demand for things like guidelines and regulations will start to be there. And, and certainly in our case, one of the first things we do whenever we're regulating a new area will be to look around overseas and see what everyone else has done. So I think that's a way a small state like New Zealand can have real influence.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to pivot a little bit from launch to telecom. Bobby, you've obviously spent a lot of your career working in telecommunications and regulatory policy, including with the ITU. So what lessons did you learn, or did you see in kind of the governance of global telecom that you think can be applied to spectrum coordination and orbital traffic? Kind of how did lessons you learned at the ITU, how do you think they can be applied to other parts of space regulation?
Thank you. I think it's a very good question. The spectrum is the lifeline of any technology to propel on, to penetrate, and it's so important in the satellite. And India is the original signatory of the ITU and the member state. And we work very religiously to follow the ITU principles and whatever the recommendations are. But moreover, I think last 10 years or so, everyone has seen that the mobile world is taken up everything and trying to capture the spectrum, not only betting for the IMT, but for the other section also. And we have been seeing that the trend is great, going further and impacting the services of other sectors, especially in the satellite. Nevertheless, but we see there is a progression is taking place in the terrestrial satellite integration, which is NTN is happening. 3GPP released 18 and further, and I think this gives a impulse scope that there is a light out of the tunnel. So there is definitely, but I think we are passing through a what you can say turbulence time, and I think this is surviving through turbulent time. I think there are a lot of you can see the merger acquisitions and consolidation is happening in the satellite world. But eventually, I think it is the customer is going to have the seamless connectivity, whether direct to device and all. I think I'm a firm believer that I think this is going to lead us to a better future for all of us. So at least your mobile phone, which you have in hand, it is capable of connecting with you, whether you are into traditional network or whether you're a satellite. So I'm very positive about that. Thank you.
Dr. Wu, you talked about, increasing congestion in space and orbits getting busier and busier. With Taiwan conducting increasingly complex missions, what have you learned about, creating missions in these busy orbits to reduce risks as much as possible?
I think that's just like you just mentioned the ITU, and Taiwan is not a member of ITU, unfortunately. So we have hard time on that. So I think the international cooperation through the technology partnership is very important for Taiwan to get around this problem. So in addition to the domestic development, so we take the approach of domestic and also international cooperation and follow the international standard very closely if possible. That's what our approach is we're doing now.
So I want to talk a little bit about space situational awareness. Obviously something that impacts all actors in space, not something you can say, oh, we're only going to work with people from our country. In the US, it looks like the TRACS program that is being run by the Office of Space Commerce, who you just heard from. But I'm curious to hear from each of you, and Anil, we can start with you, on how your countries are approaching SSA and tracking data in space, and how you're looking to work with other partners to get a more complete view of the data of where stuff is in orbit.
I think this is a very important that we use with the SSA for both for strategy critical and for our logistics and other things, because it's very important that I think this is required a close cooperation, international cooperation with that. I think you are developing technology for doing the SSA, but at the same time, there are other things that are also good available outside. I think there's a need for cooperation in that sense. So it's very important that you have to have a space situational awareness, which is, I see this as a very critical at this time. Thank you.
What about for you, Andrew? How are you approaching it in New Zealand? And do you think there needs to be a more structured international way of sharing data on SSA?
Yes, I think that's right. But I do think New Zealand has to take its own action as well. We can't wait for an international system to be established. So the way it works in New Zealand, again, I had to keep coming back to this learning by doing that we use through our regulatory system, but we've learned the hard way that requirements like having contact details for any satellite that's launched, particularly when we've got conjunction warnings being issued, it can be an emergency situation for companies to be able to get in touch with each other and manoeuvre if need be. And so that's a requirement that we've now built into our licenses that we issue for our satellites. So that's one way that we help with the space situational awareness and the sort of industry contact level. It would be good to see that approach be more consistently rolled out in other countries. Another example we've had is with very, very small satellites, where we know in the past, at least, trackability has been a concern. So one of the requirements we've introduced there is to for satellites that are smaller than 1U to basically demonstrate how they can increase their cross-sectional radar area in such a way that they're able to be tracked and monitored by other satellites in the area. We monitor how the behaviour of our satellites once they're launched very closely, and we are up for considering other approaches as well. So, for example, I mentioned the contact details that we require to be made public. We are thinking about whether that needs to be done through a unified single place, such as SpaceTrack, to make sure that there's a single place that everyone can go for that kind of information.
Dr. Wu, over to you on Taiwan.
In Taiwan, as a matter of fact, we have the SSA collaboration with U.S. Space Force for quite a long time. And recently, we are able to access JCO, Joint Commercial Operations under U.S. Space Force. Recently, also, we are also able to access through EU SST, I think that's space surveillance and tracking. So with this, I think it provides us abundance of SSA information, which is quite helpful. In addition, we also have a very positive experience in working with private sectors. And I think they do provide a very timely, efficient, and innovative way of the SSA information data sharing. So I think the commercial space activity increased so rapidly. I think it's how to coordinate and sort of work with commercial entity become very crucial in maintaining the orbital safety in the future.
So I want to talk with each of you a little bit about lessons learned. I know, Andrew, you've already talked about, the debris removal mission and how New Zealand handled that kind of novel technology. With all the launches going out of New Zealand and all the new missions that are launching aboard those, what lessons have you learned with balancing, the need for oversight and the need for regulations with the desire to, let innovation fly?
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. And, New Zealand's really going from strength to strength here. So we're up over 70 missions now launched from New Zealand. In terms of number of launches hosted, we're actually number 3 in the world, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. There's the United States, China, and then there's New Zealand. So, the approach that I suppose that we try to bring to things is to be flexible and enabling, and really have a performance-based system rather than try and be too prescriptive. So we do focus on outcomes, and we set expectations rather than prescribing detailed requirements. And that really gives us, I think, an inbuilt flexibility to respond to different circumstances and different situations. I did reference earlier our active debris removal policy. That's one example. We also had a mission in 2022. It was to the moon, which is pretty amazing as well. New Zealand launching a rocket to the moon with the Pathfinder mission for Artemis capstone. And so that required us to confront the issues of what do we do with the payload once it's finished its mission around the moon, lunar disposal, which again we were lucky to be able to draw on some industry guidelines for that. And again, wanted to set a sort of an outcomes-based approach to that rather than being too definitive, and gave some flexibility in terms of options of how people met those detailed outcomes in terms of minimising the impact. The other thing I think I'd say from a New Zealand perspective, even though we're a new player and our Act was actually only passed in 2017, we're quite conscious in this sector that modernisation isn't a sort of set and forget kind of activity. We need to keep reviewing our approach, and in fact we've got some active work underway at the moment to think about how enabling has our system actually been. There's a number of things we were worried about when the law was first passed, that 150 plus payloads later we find are maybe not the concern that we thought they were. So we're taking the opportunity to have a good look at modernising our law, even though it's less than 10 years old, to make sure that we kind of keep pace with the sector and continue to enable innovation.
So I want to turn over to India next, Anil. The Indian space sector is doing so much cool stuff, so many new startups, so much new technology. From your perspective with SIA-India, what is the role of industry associations in all of this in terms of setting these norms of behavior, and any lessons learned you can share from your organization on that?
So industry has to play an active and important role in the whole situation. We have the annual flagship event called India Space Congress. The last India Space Congress, on 26 June, we have a New Delhi declaration on space sustainability and debris mitigation. That is the initiative taken from the industry. So we came out with the active plan, and there are 6 pillars to it, and each one has to work thing, and they're a work in progress. And once this report is complete, then we will share with our policymaker about that's what the industry, have collected the information. And we can't be just silent, be silent and see that what's advancement is taking place in overseas or internationally, and then we follow that. At the same time, we have to be proactive in terms of that. And second thing is very important is cataloging those debris. And so far, there's only 10 centimeters are being cataloged. What about then? So the cataloging is also very important. So at the same time, we also have to. We also have the way technology should come into way. Whatever the new launches are going up, they should be the one where you have to drive them up after their life to the graveyard or to bring back. So those things or increase their life expectancy in terms of the onboard services like that. So these are the things which industry is looking forward very much. Thank you.
Working with the commercial sector and with international partners, obviously something we've heard about a lot in Washington this week as NASA has announced all of their changes with the Ignition program. But Dr. Wu, would love to hear how you're approaching this with Taiwan, how you're, as TASA's mission set is expanding, how you're working with commercial and international partners.
I think government historically set up the rules, okay, and in space. But today, I think much innovation and activity operation comes from the private sectors. So how to coordinate and engage with the operation, how to apply the commercial capability to facilitate the safe operation of the satellite in space, I think is crucial. And especially in Taiwan, we do not have so far we just established our launch vehicle program. So still far away from the real launch activity like India or New Zealand. So for us, how to catch up, and also I think there's some need to design how to the data sharing and among different entities, government, private sector, and international partner, as crucial for us to operate safely in the future. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, how to act. We've talked a lot about rules and regulations and norms today, but how to actually get players to follow them, both governments and commercial. As I said at the beginning, it's in everyone's best interest for space to remain usable. But today, any sort of, authoritative enforcement mechanism is split between different organizations. So, Anil, would love to start with you, kind of what you think the best way is to encourage adherence to these norms, whether it's, positives for those who do, kind of punishments for those who don't. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
I think in the beginning I just said the rules have to be made and those rules have to be followed. And I think all these, the rules don't follow, then there have to be proper monitoring to it. So at least those who are violating those, they should be brought to the books. So I think that's required, the international cooperation. Each one should work. And I from the industry side, that we are equally responsible for that thing. So the rules have to be followed. Rules have to first made, then to follow. Thank you.
Andrew, over to you. Any thoughts on kind of how, once the rules are made, to ensure that they are followed, and any other industries that you think could be models for this?
Yeah, I have a wee think about the other industries while I'm talking, but in terms of how to make sure people follow the rules, in our experience, the people who are coming to launch satellites, and certainly the launch operators, not single-player games. The launchers are going to want to be there for many years, and very often the payloads will come back to the same launchers. So, if someone was to choose, although we have limited options, once someone is on orbit, if they're not following the requirements that we've set out in our regulations, we do also have the ex-ante power the next time they come back, so and on top of that, I would say we also have the ability to make it clear to other regulators when someone maybe hasn't followed the procedures that we have put in place. I might have to pass over to Dr. Wu perhaps to think about other industries. Can you think of any other examples where other industries we could learn from for compliance mechanisms?
I think it's pretty tough. Okay, and all those will need to be recognized by all stakeholders, otherwise they won't follow. So I think we need to be patient. And through a lot of negotiation, coordination, and also engage intensely to set up some, data sharing standard, and also I think this needs a lot of work to work together. And yes, it's very tough.
I know one thing I was thinking, I know I kind of sprung that on you. I was thinking about like green energy subsidies for companies, right? Like, is there a way to model some sort of incentives like that? Obviously very different industries, but didn't mean to spring that on you.
No problem.
We have about a minute left. I would love, Dr. Wu, to start with you and just sort of do like a quick lightning round about kind of your biggest predictions about kind of orbital stewardship for the next decade. Sort of, where do you think we are 10 years from now?
It's very difficult to imagine, but as you know, the orbit is so congested, become more increasingly congested, and also very dynamic. I think we are just worried, and something might happen. And if some evil country, if they do something really evil, that's something really disaster for humankind. So we need to be very cautious and be patient to handle this matter. Yeah.
What about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think the future is really going to be through joining up ways of regulating activity from the bottom up rather than waiting for a top-down solution, because this is an industry that is going forward and it's going to happen. It's not going to wait for rules from the top down. So finding ways to cooperate from the bottom up, from at the moment a relatively small number of parties regulating the activity, I think that's the way forward.
I think Anil, you'll have the last word.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think this is what you are leaving behind our future generation. I think we have to act fast, and we have to have a coordinated way. So at least because things are happening. Tens of thousands of satellites are being, and there is already thing, and so such satellite which is being launched earlier, there's no data available for those. So I think this is very important for us.
Well, great. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you all so much for traveling so far to be here, and thank you to our audience.